Have you ever felt like your world was falling apart? Like no matter how hard you tried, things just wouldn't work out. Maybe you've prayed, but heaven seems silent. Maybe you're standing at a crossroads unsure of which path to take. Or perhaps you're carrying a burden so heavy that you wonder if God even sees you. I want you to hear me clearly today. You are not alone. God sees you. He knows your struggles, your fears, and your pain, and He is inviting you to trust Him, not just when life is easy, but in every situation. But let's be honest, trusting God isn't always easy. When life is uncertain, when we don't have answers, when our hearts are breaking, doubt creeps in, the enemy whispers, "What if God doesn't come through? What if He's forgotten about you?" But let me tell you the truth, God never forgets, He never fails, and He is working behind the scenes even when you can't see it. Today I want to share with you why trusting God is the key to peace, strength, and victory in your life. Because no matter what you are facing, God is in control. And when you put your trust in Him, you will never be disappointed. So lean in, open your heart, and let's discover together why you can trust God in every situation. Life can change in an instant. One phone call, one diagnosis, one unexpected turn, and suddenly everything feels uncertain. In those moments, when fear grips our hearts and questions flood our minds, we must remember a simple yet powerful truth. God is in control even when life feels out of control. Nothing catches Him by surprise. Nothing shakes His throne. He is the same yesterday, today, and forever. When difficulties come, our natural response is to ask, "Why is this happening?" We look for explanations, trying to make sense of the chaos, but the real question isn't why. It's, "God, what are you doing in this?" Because He is always doing something. Even when we don't understand, He is working behind the scenes, orchestrating every detail for our good and His glory. Think about Joseph. One moment he was his father's beloved son. The next, he was thrown into a pit and sold into slavery. Then, just when things started looking better, he was falsely accused and thrown into prison. From the outside, it seemed like his life was spiraling downward, but God was in control. He was positioning Joseph for something greater than he could have imagined, and at just the right time, God elevated him to a place of influence, using him to save an entire nation. You see, if Joseph had only looked at his circumstances, he might have thought, "God has forgotten me." But God, He was preparing, He was shaping Joseph's character, teaching him to trust, and leading him toward His purpose. That's what God does. He takes what looks like setbacks and turns them into setups for something greater. But let's be honest, when we're in the middle of the storm, it's hard to see God's hand. We feel abandoned. We wonder if He's listening. But here's what we must hold on to. God sees what we cannot see. He knows what we do not know. And while we may not understand what's happening now, He is leading us somewhere good. One of the greatest struggles we face in trusting God is the need for control. We like to have the answers. We like to know what's coming next. And when things don't go according to our plans, we panic. We try to fix it ourselves. But let me tell you something. God is not asking you to figure it all out. He's asking you to trust Him. There's a verse in Isaiah that says, "For my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways, declares the Lord." Isaiah 55:8. That means God's ways are higher than ours. His plans are greater, and if we could see what He sees, we would never doubt Him again. Think about the disciples in the boat during the storm. The waves were crashing, the wind was howling, and fear took over. They thought they were going to drown. But Jesus was right there with them. He stood up and spoke 3 words, "Peace, be still." And immediately the storm stopped. The wind and the waves obeyed Him. Now, here's what I want you to see. The disciples were afraid because they focused on the storm instead of the one in the boat with them. And we do the same thing. We look at the problem, the crisis, the uncertainty, when we should be looking at Jesus, because He is greater than the storm, and He has the power to bring peace no matter how fierce the winds may be. You might be facing something right now that feels overwhelming. Maybe it's a financial crisis, a broken relationship, or a health battle. Maybe you've been praying for an answer, but heaven seems silent. Can I tell you something? Just because you don't see an answer yet doesn't mean God isn't working. He is. And He is asking you to trust Him. Trust is not about understanding everything. It's about believing that God is who He says He is, faithful, loving, and always in control. It's about resting in the truth that He is for you, not against you, that He is holding your life in His hands. So what do we do when life feels out of control? We surrender. We stop trying to force our own way and simply say, Lord, I trust you. And when we do that, when we truly release our worries into His hands, we will experience a peace that cannot be shaken. No matter what you are facing today, remember this: God is still in control. And when you trust Him completely, you will never be disappointed. Nobody likes going through hard times. We don't wake up in the morning hoping for trials, for difficulties, for moments that shake our faith. But whether we like it or not, challenges come. And when they do, we have a choice. We can let them grow us, or we can let them grow us. Because here's what we need to understand. Faith doesn't grow in comfort. It grows in difficulty. The strongest faith is built in the moments when we have no choice but to trust God. Think about this. When everything in life is going well, when there are no problems, no struggles, no uncertainty, it's easy to say, I trust God. But real trust is proven when the situation doesn't make sense, when the answers don't come quickly, when life takes a turn we never expected. That's when faith is tested. That's when God stretches us, refines us, and builds something deeper within us. Look at the story of the Israelites in the wilderness. God had delivered them from Egypt, parted the Red Sea, and performed miracle after miracle before their eyes. But the moment they faced difficulty, the moment things didn't happen on their timeline, they doubted Him. They complained, they feared, and they forgot what God had already done. They wanted the promised land, but they didn't want the process. And because of their lack of trust, what should have been an 11-day journey turned into 40 years of wandering. And that's what happens when we resist the growth process. Instead of trusting that God is leading us, we become frustrated, impatient, and fearful. But God's desire is never to harm us. It's to refine us, to shape us, to prepare us for something greater than we can see. Every challenge we face is an opportunity for our faith to grow stronger. Think about gold. Before it becomes pure, it has to go through fire. The heat melts away impurities, removing everything that doesn't belong, and the same is true for us. God allows the fire of trials not to destroy us, but to refine us. He burns away our doubt, our self-reliance, our fears, and anything else that keeps us from fully trusting Him. And when we come through on the other side, we are stronger, purer, and more like Him. Sometimes we ask, God, why am I going through this? But a better question is, God, why? What are you teaching me through this? Because God never wastes a trial. If He allows it, He has a purpose for it. And when we embrace that truth, we begin to see our struggles differently. Look at Job. Here was a man who had everything: wealth, health, a family, success. And in an instant, he lost it all. He had every reason to question, every reason to give up. But instead, he chose to trust God, even when he didn't understand. And because of his faith, God restored him and blessed him even more than before. Maybe you're going through something right now that feels overwhelming. Maybe you've been asking, God, why is this happening? Maybe you've prayed for relief, but the situation hasn't changed. Let me encourage you. God is growing your faith. He is stretching you, refining you, and preparing you for something greater than you can see. When we trust God in the hard places, something incredible happens. We stop relying on our own strength and we start depending on Him. And that's exactly where He wants us, fully surrendered, fully trusting, completely at peace, knowing that He is in control. So the next time you face a challenge, don't see it as an obstacle, see it as an opportunity to trust deeper, to grow stronger, to walk closer with God, because every challenge is a stepping stone toward greater faith. God is not allowing this trial to break you. He is using it to build you. Trust Him and watch your faith grow stronger than ever before. There's a kind of peace that the world can't offer. It's not found in money, success, or even in the absence of problems. It's a peace that remains steady when life is unpredictable, a peace that holds firm when everything around us is shaking. And that kind of peace comes only from one place: trusting and obeying God. So many people today are searching for peace. They think they'll find it when their circumstances improve, when they get that promotion, when the right relationship comes along, or when a certain problem disappears. But real peace doesn't come from circumstances. It comes from obedience. It comes when we fully surrender to God and say, "Lord, I trust you and I will follow where you lead." The reason so many struggle with anxiety, fear, and restlessness is because they're trying to do things their own way instead of following God's way. They pray for peace but live in disobedience. They want God's blessings, but they don't want to follow His instructions. But here's the truth: you can't have the peace of God without walking in obedience to God. His peace is the result of trust, and trust is revealed in obedience. Think about Jonah. God told him to go to Nineveh, but Jonah had his own plan. He didn't like God's instruction, so he ran in the opposite direction. And where did that get him? In the middle of a storm, thrown overboard, swallowed by a great fish, sitting in darkness, alone, afraid, and miserable. There was no peace in disobedience, but the moment he surrendered, the moment he said, "Lord, I'll do what you've asked," everything changed. God rescued him, restored him, and put him back on the right path. That's what happens when we obey. We may not always understand why God is leading us in a certain direction, but we don't have to. Obedience isn't about understanding, it's about trust. It's about believing that God's way is always better, even when we can't see the full picture. And when we choose to follow Him, we experience the kind of peace that nothing in this world can shake. Many times people hesitate to obey because they're afraid. They wonder, what if it doesn't work out? What if I fail? What if God is asking me to give up something I don't want to let go of? But what they don't realize is that disobedience costs far more than obedience ever will. The longer we resist God, the more restless we become. We see it in people who live with constant worry, frustration, and an unsettled heart, because deep down, they know they are not walking in alignment with God's will. Look at Peter when he stepped out of the boat to walk on water. As long as his eyes were on Jesus, he was fine. But the moment he focused on the wind and the waves, he began to sink. Why? Because he shifted from trust to fear, from obedience to doubt. But here's the beautiful part. When he cried out for help, Jesus reached out and caught him. That's what God does. Even when we falter, He is there, ready to steady us, ready to lead us back to where we need to be. Obedience is not always easy, but it is always worth it. Sometimes God will ask us to step out in faith before we see the outcome. He may ask us to forgive when we don't feel like it, to give when we think we don't have enough, to let go of something we've been holding on to too tightly. But every act of obedience draws us closer to Him. Every step of faith brings more peace, more joy, more clarity. Maybe right now God is calling you to obey in a specific area. Maybe He's been speaking to your heart about something, but you've been hesitating. Let me encourage you. Don't wait. Don't resist. Don't run the other way. Surrender. Trust Him. Follow where He leads. Because true peace is found on the path of obedience, and when you walk in it, you will never regret it. There is no situation so hopeless that God cannot turn it around. No matter how broken, how lost, or how impossible things may seem, God is always at work, and He is always leading His children toward victory. The problem is that too often we measure our circumstances by what we see, by what we feel, and by what the world tells us is possible. But faith doesn't work that way. Faith looks beyond what is seen and believes that God is greater than the situation. One of the biggest mistakes we make is thinking that God operates within human limitations. We look at our problems, and if we can't see a way out, we assume there is no way. But God is not bound by what we can see. He is not confined to human logic. He is the God who created the heavens and the earth, who spoke and brought life into existence. He is the same God who parted the Red Sea, who fed thousands with just a few loaves and fish, who raised the dead, healed the sick, and made the blind see. And if He could do all of that, what makes us think He cannot handle whatever we are facing today? The enemy wants us to believe that our problems are bigger than our God. He wants to fill our minds with doubt, to keep us so focused on the size of the mountain that we forget the one who moves mountains. But when we shift our focus, when we stop looking at the size of our problem and start looking at the greatness of our God, everything changes. Suddenly we realize that the battle is not ours to fight alone. The weight of the burden is not ours to carry, because God has already gone before us and He has already secured the victory. Think about the story of David and Goliath. They looked at his size, his strength, his weapons, and they saw no way to win. But David saw things differently. He didn't look at the giant, he looked at his God, and he declared with confidence, "The battle is the Lord's." That's what faith does. It doesn't deny the existence of the problem, but it refuses to believe that the problem is bigger than God. And because of David's faith, he stepped out in confidence, and with just a simple stone and a slingshot, God gave him the victory. Maybe today you're facing a Goliath of your own. Maybe it's a financial crisis, a health diagnosis, a broken relationship, or an uncertain future. Maybe the enemy has been whispering in your ear, telling you that it's hopeless, that things will never change, that you'll never make it through. But that's a lie, because the same God who gave David victory is the same God who fights for you. And when you put your trust in Him, you can stand firm, knowing that the outcome is already in His hands. Faith doesn't mean we will never face battles. It doesn't mean life will be easy or that we will never struggle. But it does mean that no matter what comes against us, we are never fighting alone. God goes before us, He stands beside us, and He promises that in Him we are more than conquerors. That means the enemy may try to knock you down, but he cannot defeat you. Trials may come, but they will not destroy you. Because when your trust is in God, victory is not just possible, it is guaranteed. There is no situation too big for God, no challenge He cannot overcome, no battle He cannot win. When you trust Him, you are putting your life in the hands of the one who has never lost a battle, and no matter how impossible things may seem right now, remember this: God is not finished with your story. Victory is coming, and when it does, it will be greater than anything you could have imagined. There are moments in life when everything seems to fall apart. The plans we carefully laid out crumble before our eyes. The people we trusted let us down, and the dreams we once held so tightly slip right through our fingers. In those moments, it's easy to ask, God, where are you? Why is this happening? But here's what we need to understand. God's timing is always perfect, and His delays are not His denials. What looks like an unanswered prayer is often God's way of setting things in motion for something greater than we could ever imagine. Waiting is one of the hardest things we have to do. When we don't see immediate results, when our prayers seem to go unheard, when nothing seems to be changing, we start to wonder if God is listening. But He is always listening. He is always working, even when we can't see it. And if we could see the full picture, if we knew everything God was doing behind the scenes, we would never doubt His timing again. Look at Abraham. God promised him a son, but years passed and nothing happened. The wait was long, the delays were frustrating, and at one point he and Sarah tried to take matters into their own hands. They thought maybe God needs our help. But when we try to rush God's plan, we only create unnecessary trouble. And yet, despite their mistakes, God was still faithful. At the right time, exactly as He had promised, Isaac was born. That's what we need to remember. God's promises are not dependent on our timeline. Just because something hasn't happened yet doesn't mean it won't happen. His delays are not a sign of His absence, but a sign of His preparation. He is aligning things perfectly, shaping our hearts and positioning us for the blessing that is ahead. Sometimes we wait because God is protecting us from something we don't see. What looks like a delay might actually be His way of keeping us from stepping into something we're not ready for. Other times we wait because there is something He needs to develop in us before we step into the next season. He is strengthening our faith, teaching us patience, and reminding us that our trust should be in Him, not in our own understanding. Think about Joseph. God gave him a dream that one day he would be a ruler, but the path to that promise was anything but easy. He was betrayed by his brothers, sold into slavery, falsely accused, and thrown into prison. Year after year he waited, but in every situation God was working. He was preparing Joseph, refining him, and at just the right time, He elevated him to a position of authority that saved an entire nation. If Joseph had given up during the waiting, he would have missed the fulfillment of God's promise. That's why we must not give up when things don't happen as quickly as we expect. We must not grow weary when the answers don't come right away, because God is never late. He knows exactly when to open the right doors, when to bring the right people, and when to shift things in our favor. Our job is not to figure out the timing. Our job is to trust Him completely. Maybe you've been waiting for a breakthrough. Maybe you've been praying for something and it feels like nothing is happening. Let me remind you, just because you don't see movement doesn't mean God isn't working. He is arranging things in ways you cannot imagine. The answer is coming. The breakthrough is on its way. And when it happens, you will look back and see that His timing was perfect all along. The waiting season is not a wasted season. It's where faith is strengthened, where trust is deepened, and where God prepares us for the blessings ahead. If you're in a season of waiting, don't lose heart. Keep trusting, keep believing, and keep holding on to His promises, because when God moves, it will be right on time, and it will be greater than anything you could have ever planned for yourself. There comes a point in every believer's life when they have to make a decision. Will they trust God completely, or will they hold back? Will they surrender everything into His hands, or will they try to control the outcome? Trusting God isn't just about believing in Him when things are going well. It's about surrendering to Him even when we don't understand, even when we can't see the full picture, and even when things don't happen the way we expected. True trust is full surrender, letting go of our plans, our fears, our doubts, and placing everything into the hands of the one who never fails. There is a reason the Bible tells us to lean not on our own understanding. Our perspective is limited. We see only a small part of the picture, but God sees the whole thing. He knows what's ahead, He knows what's best, and He knows exactly how to lead us where we need to go. But we have to be willing to let go. And that's not always easy. Sometimes we hold on because we're afraid. We think, what if I let go and things don't turn out the way I want? But real trust means believing that even if things don't go according to our plan, God's plan is still better. His way is always higher, His wisdom is always greater, and His timing is always perfect. One of the greatest examples of surrender is Jesus Himself. The night before He went to the cross, He prayed, "Father, if it is possible, let this cup pass from me, but not my will, but yours be done." That is surrender. That is full trust. He didn't run from God's plan, He embraced it, knowing that His Father's will was greater, and because of that surrender, salvation was made available to the whole world. God calls us to that same kind of trust, to lay down our own will and say, Lord, not my will, but yours be done. It may not always be easy. Sometimes surrender means letting go of a relationship we wanted to work out. Sometimes it means walking away from an opportunity we thought was right for us. Other times it means choosing faith over fear when everything in us wants to hold on. But surrender is never about losing. It's about making room for God to do something greater. When we let go, we allow Him to step in and do what only He can do. Abraham had to surrender when God asked him to take Isaac to the altar. That didn't make sense. Isaac was the child of promise, the very thing Abraham had waited for. But Abraham didn't hesitate. He trusted that God knew what He was doing, and because of that trust, God provided. He stopped Abraham before he made the sacrifice and gave him a ram instead. That's what happens when we surrender. We see God provide in ways we never imagined. Too many people live with unnecessary stress and anxiety because they are holding on too tightly to things God is asking them to release. They try to control every outcome, worry about every detail, and fight against the very process God is using to bless them. But peace comes when we release control, when we say, God, I may not understand, but I trust you. I may not know how this will work out, but I know you are faithful. That's when we begin to experience a freedom that only surrender can bring. Maybe there's something in your life right now that you need to surrender. Maybe it's a fear that has been weighing on your heart. Maybe it's a plan you've been clinging to, unwilling to let go. Maybe it's the need for answers when God is simply asking you to trust Him. Whatever it is, let it go. Place it in His hands. Because when you surrender to God, you are not giving up. You are stepping into something greater. You are allowing Him to work in ways you never could on your own. God's plans for you are good. His purpose for your life is greater than anything you could dream for yourself. But you will never fully experience His best until you fully trust Him. When you surrender, you make room for His peace, His provision, and His perfect plan to unfold. And when you do, you will see that there is no safer place to be than in the hands of Almighty God.